Hello, I am the Grub Street vlogger, and I have just got back from work. It is a terribly grey, well, it was terribly grey and raining, and then I got home and the rain had suddenly stopped and the sun's coming out. There you go. My sister did this thing where she tried to read as many children's books as she could over a weekend, 48 hours. I thought, that sounds fun. One, because the idea of just sitting around reading children's books sounds fun. And two, I do have a lot of children's books accumulating on my sort of children's and folklore shelf that I need to get through. So I thought, I'll have a go. So I made some piles. That's some of them. Some more. And some more. Right. Because I always get a bit carried away when I start making piles of these things. So when I was a kid, my favourite authors were like Roald Dahl, Dickens Smith, Indian in the Cupboard, Lynn Reed Banks, Emmeline's Moon, and The Snow Spider, those sorts of things. And then I moved on to Robin Jarvis, and I loved those. And so that was kind of my thing. So a lot of what I've got here are other people's childhoods. So there's a lot of sort of little girl stories, I suppose you could call them. Like you've got like Milly-Molly-Mandy and Ramona stories, which, as well as that, seem to be quite American. They could get a bus pass now, but they're not very well known here. And then I've got stories translated. So I've got some books by the guy from Emil with the detectives. I've got the Happy Prince. I've got Pippi Longstockings, and a bunch of other things that are translated. And then just some classics I never got around to, like Silver Sword, or Elidor, or Weird Stone of Brisingamen, or Borrowers. And so, yeah, that's what I'm going to do over the weekend. I'm going to see how many of these children's books I can get through. However, Faye had a caveat, and that was that she had to do kind of the normal things that she did throughout the day, so she still had to walk the dog and stuff. So I've still got to go to Samuel Johnson's house and do my laundry and stuff like that. But while I'm doing everything, I'm going to see how many children's books I can read. Join me on my journey when hopefully I won't drop them all and throw them all over the floor. Here goes. Good morning. I've just woken up at my normal time. Having had dreams of being wrongfully imprisoned, so I could probably do a bit of a cheer up. I'm starting with The Little Prince. I've heard this is great, but something about the pastels, I think. The word little in the title. Maybe the bow tie. I've always thought this was going to have very soft edges. So, be talking down to the reader maybe. I don't know. Trying to find out. Little Prince. So I've just finished The Little Prince. And although it is soft, it's not namby-pamby. I thought it was going to be sort of a bit infantilizing, a bit sort of goo-goo-goo. But no, it's quite a sad story, really. It's about this lost little prince who's looking for friends and wants to look after a rose who he loves. There's a distinct implication that this rose is a bit of a coquette, and has him wrapped around her little finger, actually. Towards the end, when the little prince has to go back to his planet, and he's talking about up in the stars, you'll hear me laughing, or you'll imagine me laughing, and now all the stars have laughter in them, and all this kind of stuff. It gets a bit pretentious. No, just not as light-footed and playful as the rest of the book. So there's that. But yeah, very enjoyable. Next, I'm going to go for Pippi Longstocking for a bit of anarchy. I'm also going to have a cup of tea, and get out of bed even. Oh yes, here goes. So I'm up, I'm dressed, and I've read Pippi Longstocking. Pippi Longstocking's great. It's really, really good. It's essentially a child's fantasy, isn't it? I mean, this child is strong, she's rich, and she has no parents, and she can do whatever she wants. And so she does do whatever she wants. Luckily, she's not a horrible person, but she's a very thoughtless one, and she does upset a few people, especially adults. The bit where she goes to school, because that's so I read a few bits. Yeah, there's a few chapters before she goes to school, and I thought, oh, she'll be dreadful in school. And when she goes to school, it's brilliant because the teacher's asking her maths questions, and she's like, well, if you know the answer, why are you asking me? And then when she's given like letters to read, there's a really good sort of piss take of phonics almost, where she's going, Ireland, the teacher, Ireland. It's like, yeah, Ireland, get it. What's the line with the little spot? Yeah, that's got nothing to do with that. Though if it were me teaching that, that's when I would probably say, yeah, they don't. But if we all agree on it, we can communicate. In some ways, it's a shame of Pippi not learning to read, because she's got a massive imagination. She comes up with so many just outrageous stories about things. There's a whole chapter where she just comes up with daft stories about her granny's maid, because she's at a tea party and all the sort of posh old women are moaning about their maids, which does come up in a lot of books. This is obviously a conversation that was had by middle class women all over the place, and she's just making up these terrible stories. Yeah, my maid used to smash china. In fact, she had a little hammer and she just used to go around smashing it, and my granny had to buy new china every week, but she was a lovely girl. So there's that. It's just fun, you know. The most consequence there is at one point a little boy cuts his finger a tiny bit and they get their clothes messy, and for that they get to have play the floor is lava in a house at a birthday party where there's a horse, and all sorts of things. They get to go to the circus, but she's better at all the circus stuff. There's some great quotes. I really liked her sort of logic and her reasoning. So at one point they're talking about ghosts, and she gets distracted and goes in a cupboard and comes out with a nightshirt, and all the other kids are like, it's a ghost, and she pulls it off and goes, no, it's a nightshirt, there's nothing dangerous about a nightshirt. They don't bite, except in self-defence. And that was a good one. Or the bit in the circus where she goes up to the strong man and she's like, hey, let's have a wrestle. That's good fun. Some thieves come in and pretend to get in the house by going, we want to know what the clock says. And she's like, easy, tick-tock. And just things like that was good fun. And during the picnic, she wants to go in the sunny bit because she wants her freckles to thrive. Cool. Maybe that's why phonics thrive. Yeah, it's just a good fun. She's placed in a world where, like, the police come to put her in a children's home, and she just runs away from them. And they go, "Let's not bother." And she goes to school for one day, and her teacher's like, "I don't think you're ready yet." So yeah, consequence-free fun. I mean, yeah, no wonder kids love it. I imagine, yeah, it's good fun. And she's not annoying, which is good. She could be easily annoying. She reminded me a lot of Anne of Green Gables, but far less constrained by reality, which, you know, I'm reading children's books, so I don't need a whole great deal of reality. So I'm back from the Samuel Johnson. Actually back a little earlier than usual. The trains were really busy, so I didn't get to do a lot of reading on the train. And then I got to Samuel Johnson, and I was told, "Hey Adam, didn't you get the email? You don't need to be here." Like, oh no, I didn't receive that email. Oh, I did receive it. I didn't read it because I was too busy reading Pippi Longstocking this morning. So yeah, there we go. So I turned up. Wasn't needed, but they said they were doing this performance about Francis Barber in the parlour. I thought, oh, that sounds fun. It was part of some City of London tour thing. You have to use smartphones to do the tour, and then it ended at the house where they had this performance. Well, don't have a smartphone, so I couldn't do the tour. But I thought, yeah, go on, let's have this performance. And it was supposed to be at 12. I get to the house at 11. So I sort of sat in the corner and read a bit of my Polly for a bit. Clever Polly and the Wolf. And then they sort of helped out a bit. And then they said, oh, it's not going to be at 12, it's going to be at 12:15. Okay. Or 12:30. Okay. Oh, 1:15. Okay. Oh, no, actually, we don't know when it's going to start. And I was like, fuck it, I'm off. Can't be bothered with this, waiting for this. So I went home via Lidl or Aldi, one of those two. got some tasty things for the weekend. I'm going to have some lunch, going to have a pot of tea, and crack on with Clever Polly and the Wolf, which is really charming and funny and enjoyable. It's quite a bit later than before. It's 7 o'clock. I came back. I had a very lovely lunch. And watched half a documentary about Howard Ashman, the composer of Little Shop of Horrors and Beauty and the Beast and Little Mermaid and things. It was on Disney Plus. It was good. Then I started to read and then I napped, which was probably not the idea. So now it's, as I say, it's 7. I did finish the complete Polly and the Wolf. I came back from Samuel Johnson halfway through the second of the 4 books, and I finished them. It's got a really lovely tone because the point is that the wolf will never win. It's sort of set up from the beginning. The wolf will never win, so there's not so much danger there. So what that means is he can really develop the wolf's character, because he's not just he's not really a threat so much. And so there were times where you feel sorry for this wolf. You feel really sorry for him, and there's something about just his constant excitement about his new plans. Right, I'm going to try this today. This might work. I'm going to do this today. I'm going to dig a big hole. I'm going to turn up to a class. I'm going to copy some nursery rhyme or story or whatever. So there's versions of him trying to do 3 pigs. And when he tries to huff and puff and blow the house down, it doesn't quite work. Then he uses bellows. And then he tries to blow the house up. And none of those things work. And then he says, well, I'm getting really interested in chimneys, did you know? And she's like, yeah, no. Chimneys, you don't want to go down ours. They're really windy and you might get stuck. So yeah, Polly's all right, but the clever Polly's all right, but the stupid wolf is the best part of it. Interestingly, as it went on, so the first 2 books were written in the 1950s. They have a very 1950s-y feel, like she goes out by herself to post a letter, and there the wolf is stalking her. They make an agreement that neither of them are allowed to step on the cracks. But then the 1980s one is pretty much similar, except there's a real magic thing in it. There's a magic carpet. One of the stories in the first one is the wolf believes he's got an invisibility spell. He makes a fool of himself, pretending to be a train, because he thinks no one can see him. So he's like, oh, I've always wanted to be a train. So he marches around going choo-choo. So that's pretty similar. But then the 90s one, a lot of it is at school. It's the first time school's actually mentioned in the book. So the wolf goes to school, and there's also a bit where the wolf goes to the nativity play. And pretends to be a sheep. It's a sheep in wolf's clothing, a wolf in sheep's clothing. But also a parody of a nativity play, and it's wonderfully how stiffly it's written, like, Mary, you are going to have a baby, okay, this kind of thing, as the wolf is there saying bar and making points about sheep. It's good. Weirdly, there's also 2 bits about doctors in the newest book. One where the wolf goes to a plastic surgeon's and talks about how he could, to be a disguise, how he could maybe shorten his nose or whatever. And he listens to it and he's horrified. Electrocute my hair off me, break the bones in my nose. What are you on about? And then he's charged £150 to talk to this madman who wants to pluck him and pull him and break the bones of his nose. And then there's the one where he goes to the doctor. He talks to the doctor about Polly and about how Polly's always talking and getting the better of him. And the doctor says that maybe she's hyperactive, and says she should eat less dairy. So that's a weird thing in this world. But there you go. I don't know where this chesty thing's coming from. I just got over a cold. Also, each book has a chapter in it dedicated to sort of silly wolf variations of famous nursery rhymes. And they're all about food. Wolf culture, just about food. This is lovely. I really, really enjoyed it. I preferred the first one most. if you're going to read it, it's probably best not. I thought maybe, yeah, if you read it as a whole, maybe it'll develop a bit. But it doesn't really. It does get a tad repetitive. Wolf's great idea is not such a great idea. The end. With lots of chatting. There's a bit where the wolf is trying to write his own version of the book. And he says, I can't do the middles. I've got the beginning. Once upon a time there was a juicy girl called Polly. And I got the ending. And the wolf ate her. I just can't do the middle bit. I don't like your stories because the middle bit's just all talking. What are we all talking for? I'm all about action. And yeah, that's all it is really. It's conversations between Polly and the wolf in which Polly runs rings around the wolf. It's very good. And not wanting to stop and talk to you, sorry, I went straight on and read another book. I read Beezus and Ramona. Weird these because, they're 60 years old and they must be big deal in America because all the list challenges have them. So when I saw them for £1 for 4 at the charity shop, I thought, you know what, let's see, different childhood. Let's see what this book. It reminds me of an American book I did read a lot as a kid. I used to like the Fudge books, the Judy Blume, Fudge, Super Fudge, about the annoying younger brother. And this is the annoying younger sister, Ramona. And she is she's very realistic, really, as a 4-year-old. I loved her thing about she went down and snuck into a place where there are loads of apples and ate one bite out of each apple because the first bite is the tasty one. I like that. I like the fact she had an imaginary iguana that she walked, which was just a string and things like that. But I did find Ramona did tip into irritating brat territory. I mean, with Fudge, it was always a sort of slightly exaggerated world. It was not quite the real world. This feels like the real world, but a couple of years ago. It feels like the real world. This was, again, written in the 50s. But in general, it feels tethered and realistic. And as such, Ramona's really irritating some of the time. All her tantrums and things. Though I like her habit of being sent into her room and then just coming down a little bit later and going, I'm ready to be good now. I remember my sister doing something very similar. When she was when she was told off, put in a corner, she'd be like, "Can I come out?" Apparently, I got told off, put in a corner, and I just stayed there, and my parents forgot about me because I was so quiet. So I was just staring in the corner, thinking my own thoughts, and they forgot to say, "Okay, Adam, come out the corner now." Yeah, and it ends with a sweet thing about Beezus has this big secret that sometimes she doesn't love her sister, and the mum and her sister say, "Yeah, of course, sisters are really really annoying. Sometimes they're gonna drive you insane," and they laugh about the things that happened when they were little, and Beezus realizes that when she's older, she'll have fond memories of some of the japes that Ramona gets up to. I like the one, actually, I forgot to say, of her inviting everyone from nursery round for a party and then not telling anyone. That's good. But then her behaviour at the party where she can't just enjoy it, that's irritating. So there you go. I mean, me and my sister have always had quite a good relationship, I suppose. Though some of the things we do laugh about include the time when she decided to hit me on the head with a plastic recorder, which I date to the time of when I realised I would never win, and I'll just do what she says. So, yeah, good book. I don't know which one I'm going to pick next, but I'm going to have a little food and drink. Getting a bit dry, and then I'll get back onto reading. So yeah, it's 10:30. There's a fox shrieking outside, and I've just finished The Borrowers, and it's really, really, really good. I thought it was brilliant. I've been reading a lot of Gothic recently, and it has a sort of Gothic frame to it. It's like a story that someone tells someone that someone tells someone, almost like a Chinese whispers. And it places it in this almost real, so it's like might be real. Who knows? And it feeds into a lovely little sort of maybe fake out ending at the end, where Arietti's writing is similar to the brother who narrates the story's writing. So maybe it is just a story he wrote or he told. But at the same time, there's something really real about The Borrowers. There's something kind of fun about it. little people who live in the walls and live around, and they borrow things. They keep them. They basically see us as these lumbering, wasteful, very large, almost pointless beings whose sole role is to be borrowed from. We have all this, drinking my tea in this, they could swim in this. What a wasteful amount of tea. So I exist for them to be able to borrow tea off me, kind of thing. Although they wouldn't hear because I'm basically in one room. So they'd catch me. I'd catch them. It wouldn't be good. But I love this whole society they've got. And it's kind of a fallen society. There were all these families named after different parts of the houses where they lived, different parts of the house where they lived. But they're all gone except for the clocks, who live behind the clock. Well, they use the clock as a secret entrance. And there's three of them: mum, dad, daughter, Pod, Homily, and Ariete. And it starts off with a very claustrophobic, cramped, very patriarchal society. Only Pod goes out, and in fact he's got all these gates and doorways that only he can open, so only he can go out. And Ariete is sort of in pain, I suppose. She's alone and there's no one to play with, and she doesn't see, the sky particularly. There's a little grate which they can look out, but she doesn't have any freedom, and she gains it. And they're thrilling little moments where they're going about borrowing. They go about climbing the furniture with pins as grappling hooks, and they're getting all these little things. And I love the ingenuity of all the invention in it. So something can be repurposed. So her bedroom is made out of cigar boxes. So she has this bedroom with this beautiful painted ceiling of a Havana scene and stuff like that. Or a chess piece. They chop the bottom off and use that as the base of a table, and then they use the rook bit, the horse's head, as a bit of decoration. That's all fun. I really like all that. And she's got a library because they really did in Victorian times do this thing where they made tiny, tiny little books in little libraries that would be almost unreadable. And it's a really cool little world, which is intruded upon by the boy, who was her brother, the narrator's brother, and was called the boy for most of it. Actually, does he have a name? He must have a name. He was killed in the Northwest Frontier in World War One. I don't think she names him. But there's a brother who helps them. And so one of the joys of it, I watched the old BBC early 90s one. I remember thinking Pod was just the best dad ever. Sort of a cosy, loving adventure dad. He's a little bit stern in this. He's a bit conservative, I suppose. But I can't remember what I was saying. This is the trouble with making this at 10:30. Hello, good morning, and it's a new day. Light streaming in. I thought I'd start with something sweet. So I went with Milly-Molly-Mandy, and I think I went a bit too sweet. In fact, these are so sort of sugary sweet that you start wanting to be cynical about them. So in the first story, she's running around to different, doing an errand, and it's kind of like that game, I went to the shops and I bought this and that and that. She's got to remember all these things. And she temporarily... Oh, my hair. My hair's been awful, by the way, in these videos, hasn't it? There's one where it's all split back there, but it's all sticking out there. And it looks like, oh dear. It looks like the Count from, he has an eye on his ankle, he lives in a terrible place. Series of unfortunate events, it looks like that Count. Anyway, sorry, Milly-Molly-Mandy. Yeah, she's forgotten her pins that she needs to buy, and she's in the shop and she's going, I need to get something, and the woman's going, sweets? No, it's for Auntie. Sweets? No, it's not sweets. You want some sweets? It's almost like she's a sweet pusher. And you just don't want it to assume the worst of every character. The blacksmith, oh, he's going to burn them to death. The great auntie's going to be a right bitch. Or, it's very unfair because these are really sweet and lovely. But something in their sweet loveliness just makes you want to see the bad side in them all. There's a chapter called Milly-Molly-Mandy Spends a Penny. And unfortunately, it's not about her finding somewhere to piss. It's that she gets a penny and she spends it. But she's a little evil capitalist, so she accumulates as she spends it. And everything always ends up nice, and everything always ends up well. The biggest challenges are they go blackberry picking and they find a sign that says no trespassing. So they go further on, and then they see a cute bunny, and they love their cute bunny. And then past the cute bunny with some blackberries they can pick. And that's about as far as sort of drama goes in these books. Another reason that you want to see the worst is the illustrations. Now, the author illustrated them herself, and she's like a Royal Academy, she was a proper artist. But there's something about the characters, especially the adults. So the rooms are full of details. Like there's these really busy rooms, and they're kind of, it's 1920s, but rural, distant. So it's still very Victorian. All the rooms, all like tatterrogs and stuff. It's the characters. So they all have these little dot eyes, and then they all have these gaunt cheekbones. And little, at most, half smiles. And you just imagine these sort of poor, starved, half these men were in World War One. They've seen shit. They're all walking around with these little dot zombie eyes and these gaunt cheekbones. And there is something about the whole book which is like this genteel rural poverty, which is lovely and sweet and innocent in the book, but you think actually there's some bad shit going on down there. And so I started the day with something sweet, and it made me feel rather sour. So now I'm going to go and have some breakfast. Hello, you find me quite a bit of time for my last entry. I ended up getting sucked in a bit of a YouTube hole. I got myself ready, had my breakfast, went off and did my laundry, and then I read Magician's Elephant. And then I found my parents, so, it's a bit later than I've only read 2 books, and it's 2 o'clock. Well, we'll see how it goes. Now, Magician's Elephant it's like a fable, really. It's very sweet. It starts off with a boy going to a fortune teller, and the fortune teller saying, "Follow the elephant if you want to find your sister." And he's like, "Well, what elephant?" And then the next scene is a magician. He's trying to make some lilies appear, but he tries a bit too hard, and an enormous elephant falls from the roof and cripples the lady. And then it's all these different threads who all influence each other by dreams. They all sort of dream about each other and dream about this elephant, and even the elephant dreams about them. And it brings them all together at the end, and brother, all the little disparate bits all come together, and it's lovely. It's very fable-like is how I would put it. It's kind of funny, like when the elephant falls in, it starts a bit of an elephant craze, and I like the elephant craze. It includes an elephant dance and that kind of thing. It's got a sort of clockworky narrative. You don't ever feel what if, or you don't. There's not a lot of tension in it because you just feel that this is all going to come together and have a lovely ending. And it has no sort of baddies in it or real antagonists. It has a few, like there's a guy who is the main boy's sort of guardian, who's this soldier who is obviously deeply scarred from his time in wars. He often falls into fits of fever, presumably from his warlike pursuits that he's caught this fever, and he's the closest thing to a bad character, but he's not a bad guy at all. He's just a limited kind of guy, and also he doesn't really provide any huge blockage. He doesn't really stop things from happening, so everything just goes along smoothly, and you end up feeling nice, and it's dreams can come true. as the song says. And that's basically what the Magician's Elephant's about. And it's lovely. It's very warm feeling inside. So I've read 2 lovely books today. So next I'm going to go back to Ramona to see if I find her as irritating as I did last time. We shall see. Ramona the Pest. Some big changes actually. 1, she's a year older. And 2, the book now goes into her head. This has a sort of negative impact in the sense that Beezus is no longer really a character. She just appears. And some of the more, I was going to say deep, but some of the more emotional elements of Beezus and Ramona aren't found in Ramona the Pest. But what it does do is it makes Ramona quite likeable. Because now we see her, we're in her head when she's figuring things out. And we're like, oh, that's why she's doing that. That's what that's about. And it makes a lot more sense. Also, possibly because she's a bit older, she doesn't resort to tantrums as much. She starts to a couple of times and doesn't, which that was one of the things I found most annoying about her in the last book. She'd just have a tantrum, and it was annoying, the way it is in real life. But in this, she tries to think her way through problems and things, and her thinking is a little bit wibbly. I actually work with children this age, 5-year-olds, and there's some really, really accurate things. Like, I've had kids in my class a bit like this, or have done things like this. For example, she sees this girl's hair, and it's all bedoingy, and she just can't help giving it a little boing. And yeah, and as a teacher, when you're like, okay, I get it, I get you want to boing the hair, but just leave the hair alone. It's annoying her. And also the way the other children, that's one of the good things. There's a whole class. It's all set in the school when she's starting school, and there's a whole class of other children, and they're all very, very recognisable. Like Davy, who she decides she loves, who does not decidedly love her back. Who gets everything wrong but tries hard. Like, I know that kid. Or the girl with the bedoingy hair, Susan, she's described as the kind of person who likes playing house because she likes bossing everyone about as mother. So, yeah, I know that kid. And then Ramona, who's getting all the sort of wrong end of the stick a lot of the time, and is asked a question and then answers it honestly, and it's not always very helpful. Like, any questions about this book? Yeah, how does the guy go to the toilet in the book? You know, things like that. They're really quite accurate. Also, I know Beverly clearly was a librarian, but she clearly looked up some teacher things, because the teacher in this is using definitive strategies that I notice and have used myself. So at the very beginning, she does an awful lot of I like the way Helen is sitting nicely, in order to try and get the other kids to be like Helen. But then one of the really interesting bits about this is how what for the teacher is just, behavioural strategy impacts her, because she really, really wants the teacher to like her. So when the teacher's got to tell her off, she feels that the teacher doesn't like her anymore. And she's kind of read too much into the relationship in some ways. She thinks that, as someone working in school with the kids, you do like the kids, and you do have a relationship with the kids, and you know them individually. The interesting thing is the next year, because you've got to clear the decks and get to know a whole load of new kids, you just move on, and so it's not. It's kind of like a close relationship in some senses, because you got to work together to get the day done and things. But at the same time, you as a teacher, you're thinking, right, I'm looking forward to clocking off. I'm looking forward to going home, doing some writing or whatever. And of course, Ramona doesn't see this. She thinks that the teacher is all about her, and that causes a few problems. And so this was way more interesting for me, partly because fixing it in her head makes her less annoying, because she seems less irrational. She's doing things for reasons, but also because of the really accurate way young school children are presented. Some interesting differences, because this is set in America, so they start off with the national anthem. We don't do anything like that, and how she's misheard the lyrics.
and gets them wrong. And then there's just weird little things, like we have a game we call Duck Duck Goose, which is called Grey Goose in this, and that was kind of cool. I like that. And then these started off as stories of the boy character called, I've forgotten his name, Hug something, Hug. Oh bollocks, where is it? Henry Huggins. And I wonder what his books are like, because he comes across as a really nice person in this, and I can't actually imagine what his stories would be, because he doesn't seem unhinged enough, I suppose, to get stories. He just seems to go through things quite pleasantly. But yeah, this was way more entertaining and less irritating and charming, but still very grounded, and she's still a pain in the ass, but she's an understandable, likeable pain in the ass now, where before in the last book she just seemed contrary for no reason. Yeah, I'm not sure how many times the word charming is going to come up when I'm talking about these books, but The Parent Trap is very charming, which I was expecting because Erich Kästner wrote Emil and the Detectives, which is brilliant. But I was also kind of not expecting, because the 1990s Parent Trap film with Lindsay Lohan was a big favourite of my sister, and it was not a big favourite of me. Apart from the fact it seems like 27 hours long, I remember it as screechy and slapsticky. But the worst thing was the British characters. They had these awful fake British accents, and there was a butler, and they lived in a mansion. And when they went through London, it made no geographical sense, and which is responsible for one of my favourite gags in Paddington, when they drive through London and it's all in the wrong order, and then they get out, and Mr. Brown's going, "I'm not paying you for that taxi ride. That was not the quickest way at all." And the taxi guy's going, "Well, I thought it would be more pretty that way." But anyway, yeah. So it's weird because you watch the film and it feels like an American thing. You know, two girls meet at summer camp. They're identical twins, and they try and get their mum. One has a mum and one has dad, and they try and get back together. In this, the summer camp is in Germany, and one is from Vienna and the other is from Munich. What I liked is how, even though it went at great length to say how identical looking the twins are, they're quite different in character. One is sort of sensible and thoughtful and thinks ahead, and all that, and the other is a wild child. More, I've read a few of these now. We got our Ramonas, we got our Pippi Longstockings and things. So there's more that kind of character. The one at the camps, the leaders of the camp going, "Oh, what's she doing now?" And so yeah, they swap, and the main sort of thrust of it all is how they maintain themselves as someone who they look exactly like, but who they don't know that well, and whose life they don't know that well, and how they maintain it, and how things are a bit different when they're around and stuff. And that's it's good fun, to be honest. The best thing about it is the tone of the book. It's very direct. There's a narrator telling you the story, and the narrator says things like, "This is going to get very complicated. Just hold on." And the narrator distracts himself from a fairly important dramatic moment of the book to complain about flies banging their head on the window and being, stupid flies. But are we humans any cleverer than they? And then it goes back to the scene, and it's like, oh yeah, they're just banging their heads on windows as well. There's not any difference between us and the flies. And so, yeah, it's a really fun, sparky, witty, charming book. I look at the time, I might get another book done. Maybe even two, we shall see. Au revoir. I've just finished The Ghost of Thomas Kempe. Probably the most literary of the books I've read. You get to the ending, you have that sort of satisfying I've read a novel quality, which is really pleasant. It's I didn't know much about it. It's by Penelope Lively, who I've enjoyed, some of her adult works, and who lectured at my MA. So she was a nice person. She had some good ideas in her lectures. And, we had a nice chat now and again. She came twice. Anyway, so I read this book, and For some reason, I thought Thomas Kemp might be like a Casper, the friendly ghost, like a kid ghost. He's not. He's a really grumpy, crotchety old man who's an alchemist and a sorcerer, and we never see him. He's a poltergeist. He throws things around. He smashes things. He writes notes and he does graffiti. And it talks about how like the air hardens when he's around, or there's a tension, or he can sort of form himself into a sort of a little knot that punches people. As such, poor old James, the main boy in the book, is getting the blame for a lot of these poltergeisty activities. No one's really believing him, except a builder called Bertie. And the builder called Bertie is also a sort of amateur exorcist, and he's probably the best character in it. He's a very straightforward, reasonable old man who also does exorcisms and puts up a shelf. At the same time, in fact, which I thought was good. There's a bit where James uncovers a diary of some previous people's dealings with the ghost, and in doing so he reads about this boy called Albert, who he really gets into Albert. No, not Albert, Arnold. He really gets into Arnold, and really he sort of has him as an imaginary friend for a bit. But it turns out that Arnold was also the main benefactor to the school, so they've got a big portrait of him as an old man with a big walrus moustache, and how he has this realization, as he puts it, people are like layers. But layers in time. And that's sort of what the book's about, how this village is this thing what it is now, in the 70s, but has been this thing for hundreds of years, and will probably be a different thing hundreds of years in the future, and how we are, just one time amongst that, and that's really cool. As he's thinking about, he's in his slanty attic room, thinking about the previous people who've been there. Except one of the previous people was Thomas Kemp, who is very, very unpleasant. He's not a nice man. He sets all these instructions, and he tries to burn down the house of a little old lady because he says she's a witch, which is deeply unpleasant. But luckily, no one gets hurt in this book. But things get shaken up a bit. I like some of the phrases in this as well. I mean, I'd say it was a very good literary book, but it had some good borrowings. I think it's the first book I've ever read in which somebody has said to somebody else, "Don't go chuntering on," which is something that gets said to me quite often. It means, talking on and on and on, as you may be able to tell by the length of this video. And also, someone says he's got another think coming, and I always thought it was another thing coming. So I'm going to have to look that up at some point. So the time is 10. I could go to bed now, call it a day, or I could go for another 2 hours and get another book in. Now, what seemed obvious, to finish by midnight was Tom's Midnight Garden, which was even recommended in the interview with Penelope Lively at the back of this book. However, the size of the print, this took me about an hour and a half, 2 hours, but it's big and spaced. The size of this print and the number of pages, I just don't think I'm going to get to the end of Tom's Midnight Garden in that amount of time. So I've got to have a look at what I've got. I could read another Ramona, but I've read 2 of those. It's not really something I want to end on. Thomas Kemp might be a nice finisher. We'll see when I update this next. It's 11:30. I didn't read Tom's Midnight Garden. In fact, the book I chose wasn't on any of the list of the books I was going to read. I went with a book that was on a pile of books I was going to read at some point this year. It's Flora and Ulysses, and it caught my eye because it was also Kate DeCamillo who wrote The Magician's Elephant. I thought, let's read that. This is not a fable. This is the most modern of the books I've read over the weekend, and also the strangest of the books I've read over the weekend. It plays with superhero tropes. A squirrel gets sucked in a vacuum cleaner and gets superhero powers, including the power of flight and super strength. and a superhuman understanding as far as, well, super squirrel understanding. But most of all, just wants to write poetry. And the squirrel's main power is a lust for life. And he teams up with Flora, who calls herself a cynic, whose motto is don't let the heart hope, because when you're hoping, you delay your actions. And then she learns to hope, and she learns to believe in things, and to be less of a cynic. The baddie is her mum, who is a romance writer with no real sense of romance. And there's loads of very madcap characters. There's a boy called William Spiver who talks too much and pretends he's blind. There's the next door neighbour, Tootie, who's sort of ditzy. My favourite character, Mrs. Meerschaum. Dr. Meerschaum, sorry. There were 2 Dr. Meershams, one of them died. But the one who survived, she's a doctor of philosophy, which turns out not to be much help when they need medical assistance for the squirrel. But she's brilliant. She talks about her childhood in a place called Bleekukumber or something. She talks about trolls a lot and existential dread. And her favourite picture is a picture of a ginormous squid sucking down a boat, because it reminds her of her husband, who painted it in his happier days. There's a lot of very, very ridiculous characters and very, very ridiculous happenings. It all seems a bit random. It's not like the Elephant Book where everything naturally comes together. It's just weird happenstance. Some of it unbelievable. No, all of it unbelievable in this bizarre cartoony world. And as such, it's a really good read. It's really good fun, and it's the last thing I'm going to read this weekend. It's the next day. I've been to work. My weekend of reading children's books seems quite long ago at the moment. So I had a big pile of, where's my numbers? I had 3,549 pages of children's books to read. I knew I'd never actually read all of them, but there's not that many. And I ended up reading 939 on the first day, 1,221 on the second, making it a grand total of 2,160 pages. Things I didn't get round to then. Alan Garner. I just got something about fantasy, especially fantasy type fantasy. I just put it off, so that didn't happen. Moomin, I didn't want to put this off actually. Just never got picked up. I did want to read this a lot, but I didn't have enough time to leave me up to midnight. This one just seemed a bit heavy for the day. There are loads of books about fun, cute little girls and that, and then this is about, the Warsaw Ghetto and stuff. 2 of these, because it came in a 4-box set. I read 2 of them. I think 2 is good enough. And then Flying Showroom, which is another one by Erich Kästner, who did Parent Trap. And yeah, so these are what I did read. Can't really rank best to worst, I don't think. I can rank a few different things. For example, I could definitely rank most novelistic to most episodic. For example, I had a lot of very episodic books. Milly-Molly-Mandy is very episodic. Polly and the Wolf, to a fault, actually. It's a great book and a lovely tone, but it gets too episodic. Pippi Longstocking. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I've got stuff like Parent Trap, definitely Ghost Thomas Kempe, and The Borrowers. So sort of, yeah. And I prefer on the whole the novelty ones than the episodic ones. However, I mean, Pippi Longstocking and Clever Polly were absolutely brilliant. And actually Milly-Molly-Mandy was quite good. It was just, yeah. There was nothing here I would say was bad. Probably the one I enjoyed the most was Borrowers, I guess. But there's not a lot in it, really. And I had a really lovely time. I recommend anyone else try and read. So I'm winding my watch. Anyone else try and read as many children's books as possible, because there's almost like a mythical quality to that weekend now. It was a weekend away from reality with little pockets where I did have to go and do stuff. And now I'm back on the adult books for a bit, and I've got some more children's books over there, and maybe I might try it again. Who knows? If you've watched this whole video, well done. You must be a glutton for punishment. It's the longest thing I've ever made, I think, and it's just me talking about children's books getting increasingly more red-eyed and tired. But there you go. If red-eyed and tired is what you like, I hope I provided.